She had always been different. Even as a small child, while other kids ran around chasing balls or shouted in playgrounds, she found herself drawn to the sounds that came from her home's old, slightly out-of-tune piano. The instrument had been there for as long as she could remember, tucked into a corner of the living room, its black and white keys worn from years of use. Most people walked past it without noticing, but she always stopped. There was something about it that called to her, a quiet voice she could hear only if she paused long enough to listen. At first, she didn't even know how to play. Her fingers would stumble awkwardly over the keys, pressing the wrong notes and creating sounds that were far from music. Her family watched, sometimes amused, sometimes impatient. "Be careful with that," one of her parents would say, noticing her small hands hitting keys with more enthusiasm than skill. But she didn't mind. Every wrong note was a tiny lesson. Every sound was a discovery. She didn't want applause or recognition. She only wanted to understand the music hiding inside the piano. When she started school, things became harder. Other children didn't understand her fascination. During recess, they would play tag, kick balls, or gossip about the latest stories. She often wandered off to a quiet corner of the playground, humming the notes she remembered from the piano. Once someone asked why she was sitting alone. She shrugged, unable to explain that her heart was busy following the rhythm of melodies only she could hear. It was not that she disliked people, but she loved the piano more, and that made her different. Being different was never easy, especially for a child. It didn't take long for the teasing to begin. At first it was small, almost playful. "Why do you always sit there with your music books?" a classmate would ask. "Do you think you are better than us?" When she didn't respond, the laughter grew. Soon it wasn't just a few whispers. It became a chorus of giggles and mocking comments. The other children couldn't understand why someone would spend so much time with an old piano, why someone would care so much about notes on a page, or why a girl could be so quiet yet so determined. Even teachers sometimes failed to see her potential. During music class, while other children sang loudly or clapped along, she would quietly try to follow the melody on a small keyboard at the back of the room. The teacher would glance at her now and then, sighing when her fingers hit a wrong note or a rhythm slipped. "Just follow the song," they would say, almost as if her effort was a nuisance. But she didn't care about their sighs or their impatience. She was learning in her own way, at her own pace, and she knew that every wrong note was a step closer to something beautiful. After school, she would rush home to the old piano in the living room. The moment she touched the keys, everything else faded. The teasing voices from the playground, the impatient sighs from teachers, even the small arguments she sometimes heard at home, they all disappeared. It was just her and the piano. The wooden keys felt smooth under her fingers, and the sound, even when imperfect, filled her with a kind of joy that nothing else could. Sometimes she would sit for hours trying to repeat a song she had heard somewhere, or inventing something new that only she could imagine. Her family noticed her dedication, but they didn't always understand it. Occasionally, someone would peek into the room and say, "You play too much. Don't you want to do something else?" She would only smile and keep playing. To her, the piano was not just a toy or a pastime. It was a friend, a teacher, a companion that would never laugh at her mistakes or make her feel small. It was the only place where she felt truly herself. Despite the laughter and the teasing, she never stopped practicing. Each day she tried a little harder, listening carefully to the sounds, trying to make them closer to what she imagined in her mind. Sometimes she would fail, pressing the wrong key or forgetting a note mid-song. But failure didn't scare her. Every mistake was an opportunity to learn, a step toward the music she longed to create. She believed that if she kept at it, if she truly listened and practiced, one day she could make something that would make others stop and pay attention. She found inspiration in unexpected places. When she walked through her neighborhood, she would listen to the sounds around her. The wind brushing through trees, the rhythmic tapping of shoes on the sidewalk, the laughter of children playing nearby. She noticed patterns, rhythms, and tones that others ignored. At home, when her parents argued or the television blared in another room, she could still hear melodies in the chaos. Every sound, even the unpleasant ones, became a note she could work with, a small piece of music she could shape with her imagination. Her determination grew stronger because of the teasing. The more the other children laughed, the more she felt she wanted to prove something, not to them but to herself. She didn't want revenge or recognition. She simply wanted to show that passion and dedication could create beauty, even in the face of doubt and mockery. This quiet fire inside her became her guide. No matter how many people mocked her or dismissed her interest, she kept returning to the piano day after day, learning, creating, and dreaming. There were moments of loneliness, of course. Sometimes she would sit at the piano and feel tears prick her eyes, frustrated by her own mistakes or by the feeling that no one truly understood her. She longed for someone to share her music with, someone who would listen and not laugh. But in those moments, she discovered something important. She didn't need an audience to validate her efforts. The act of playing, the process of creating something from nothing, was its own reward, and that understanding gave her strength, a quiet confidence that no teasing could ever take away. Her persistence did not go unnoticed forever. Occasionally, someone would stop and listen, even if just for a moment. Sometimes it was a family member who passed by, nodding in silent approval. Sometimes it was a neighbor who heard a particularly sweet melody and smiled. These small moments were rare, but they were enough to keep her going. They reminded her that her music mattered, even if only to a few people at a time. As she grew older, her connection with the piano deepened. She began to understand not just the notes, but the feelings behind them. A simple melody could express sadness, joy, longing, or hope. She discovered that music was more than sound. It was emotion made tangible, a way to speak without words. And for someone who had often felt misunderstood, this was a revelation. The piano became not just a tool, but a voice. Through it, she could communicate things she had never been able to say out loud. Even though school and life outside sometimes felt harsh, the piano offered her a place of refuge. She would arrive home tired, sometimes upset by the cruelty of classmates or the indifference of teachers, but the moment her fingers touched the keys, her world shifted. The small apartment she lived in became a concert hall, the worn wooden floorboards a stage, and the walls around her echoed with possibility. She played until her fingers ached, until her mind felt full, until the worries of the day dissolved into music. And so she continued, day after day, year after year, unnoticed by most, but steadily growing in skill and understanding. Each note, each practice session, each mistake and correction added to a foundation that she could not yet see. She didn't know when the world would notice her or if it ever would. But she didn't play for fame or recognition. She played because it was who she was. The laughter of others, the mocking whispers, the doubts from teachers, they all existed outside her world of music. Inside there was only her, the piano, and the endless possibilities that lay in every key. This quiet dedication shaped her in ways that few understood. She learned patience, resilience, and the value of hard work. She learned that passion often required solitude, and that growth sometimes came slowly, imperceptibly, until one day it could not be ignored. Most importantly, she learned to trust herself, to follow her own heart even when others questioned her choices. In those early years, as the laughter and mockery swirled around her, she built a foundation stronger than any criticism, a love for music that nothing could break. The years went by, and the girl grew older. The piano remained her constant companion, the one friend who never judged her, never whispered cruel words, and never left. By now, her fingers had grown stronger and more precise, able to find notes with ease. She spent long hours experimenting with melodies, sometimes repeating the same sequence over and over until it felt just right. She discovered that music was not only about playing the correct notes, but about making those notes breathe, making them feel alive. Her practice sessions became rituals. Each afternoon, after finishing her schoolwork and chores, she would sit at the piano. She would close her eyes, take a deep breath, and let her fingers wander. Sometimes she played songs she already knew, carefully following the sheet music. Other times she created new melodies, letting her imagination guide her. She loved the freedom of invention, the way music could flow directly from her thoughts into sound. Each session ended with a sense of fulfillment, a quiet joy that no one else could see but that filled her completely. Even though she spent so much time with the piano, life outside was not always kind. Classmates continued to tease her, though now it was more subtle. They would whisper when she walked by, make jokes about the piano girl, who spent more time with keys than people. Sometimes they tried to discourage her in small ways, like stealing her music books or saying that piano would never take her anywhere. At first, these moments hurt deeply. She had imagined that as she improved, the teasing might fade, but instead it lingered, sometimes even from teachers who didn't understand her dedication. But she learned to ignore it, not because it didn't sting, but because she had something stronger inside. The piano had given her confidence in ways words never could. She knew that every hour spent practicing, every mistake corrected, and every melody discovered was building something that no one could take away. It was a secret power, quietly growing within her, and it gave her a sense of purpose. No matter what others said, she was moving toward something meaningful. Her parents noticed her dedication, though they still didn't always understand it. Sometimes, they would peek into the living room and smile at her concentration. Sometimes they would gently suggest she do something else with her time. But she had learned to listen to her own heart. She didn't need constant approval. She needed the piano, and that was enough. In a way, their lack of understanding made her more determined. If anyone doubted her, she felt a quiet need to prove, not to them, but to herself, that her love for music could transform into something extraordinary. She began to explore different types of music. Classical pieces challenged her mind and fingers, requiring patience and precision. Jazz taught her freedom and improvisation, helping her discover ways to express emotions without strict rules. Sometimes she would combine the styles, creating a sound that was uniquely hers. The piano, which had once been a simple source of comfort, had become a gateway to the world. Through it, she could experience beauty, sadness, joy, and hope all at once. The music she played was no longer just notes. It was a reflection of her life, her feelings, her dreams. Despite her growing skill, she often felt alone. Few people shared her passion, and even fewer understood it. She sometimes wished for a friend who could sit with her and listen, someone who would not laugh or make fun, someone who would simply understand. When she played, she imagined an audience, not to impress them, but to share her music as if it were a story unfolding. She pictured people leaning in, listening with quiet wonder and feeling the emotion she poured into each note. These imagined listeners became her motivation. She played not for applause, but for connection. Her school organized events, though she had always hesitated to participate. Talent shows and recitals were intimidating. What if people laughed? What if she made a mistake in front of everyone? She thought about the teasing she had endured, the snickers that followed her in the hallways, and felt her heart tighten. Still, the desire to share her music was growing stronger. It was one thing to play alone in her room, but another entirely to bring her music to the world, even if it was just a small part of it. One day, a teacher suggested she try out for a small school performance. She hesitated, her stomach twisting with nervousness. The idea of standing in front of an audience, of being exposed to judgment, terrified her. But the teacher's encouragement was gentle, not demanding. "You have a gift," they said quietly. "Don't hide it. People need to hear your music." Those words stayed with her. For the first time, she began to imagine what it would be like if someone actually listened, if someone really heard her. The thought was both exciting and frightening. She began preparing, practicing longer hours than ever before. She selected a piece that she loved deeply, a melody that made her heart ache with emotion. She practiced slowly, learning every note, every pause, every subtle shift in tone. Then she practiced it faster, making the music flow naturally, like a conversation between her fingers and the piano. Sometimes she played for hours without stopping, letting the music take over completely. At night, she would lie in bed and replay the piece in her mind, hearing it perfectly even when her eyes were closed. As the day of the performance approached, nerves began to build. She imagined all the worst-case scenarios, the laughter, the mistakes, the embarrassment, but she also imagined the best-case ones. She imagined people sitting quietly, listening intently and being moved by what she played. She imagined feeling a sense of pride and joy that came from sharing her passion. It was a strange mix of fear and excitement, but mostly it was hope. She hoped that her music could reach beyond her small world, beyond the teasing and the doubts, and touch someone else's heart. Her family watched nervously as she prepared. They could see the tension in her shoulders, the worry in her eyes, but they also saw the determination that had grown over the years. She practiced in the living room one last time before the performance, each note ringing clearly, each chord carrying confidence. She didn't play perfectly. There were still tiny mistakes, but those mistakes no longer mattered. She had learned that music was about more than perfection. It was about emotion, expression, and connection. She felt ready. When she arrived at the school auditorium, the whispers started immediately. Some students recognized her and smirked. Others didn't know her and wondered why she seemed so nervous. She could hear the laughter, the quiet jokes, and her stomach tightened. But she closed her eyes and imagined the piano waiting for her. She imagined her fingers dancing over the keys, letting the music speak for her. She took a deep breath, reminding herself that this was not about anyone else. It was about the music, and the music was hers to share. The moment she sat at the piano, silence began to fall over the audience. Some people leaned forward, curious. Others whispered, expecting a poor performance. She placed her fingers on the keys, feeling the familiar texture, the slight resistance, and she let the first note sound. It was soft, almost hesitant, but it carried something real, something honest. She continued, note by note, letting the music build naturally. The melody flowed, rising and falling, twisting and turning in ways that reflected every feeling she had ever known. Slowly, she noticed a change in the audience. The laughter had stopped. The whispers had faded. People were leaning forward, their eyes fixed on her hands, their expressions shifting from doubt to curiosity. Every note seemed to draw them in, every chord told a story. She could feel their attention, their wonder, and it filled her with a quiet strength. She had expected ridicule, but instead she was met with something more powerful: respect. Not because she demanded it, but because she had earned it through her music. By the end of the piece, the audience was completely silent. The last note lingered in the air, soft and fragile, as if it didn't want to end. Then came the applause, slow at first, then growing, filling the room with warmth and approval. She sat still for a moment, letting the sound wash over her, feeling a sense of pride and relief unlike anything she had known. She had faced her fear, shared her passion, and created a moment that was entirely her own. For the first time, the laughter and teasing of the past seemed distant, almost meaningless afterward. People came to talk to her, to compliment her performance, to ask how she had learned to play so beautifully. She smiled quietly, still feeling the echo of the music in her chest. She realized that her years of practice, of dedication, of quiet determination, had led to this moment. She had not changed for anyone else, but she had grown into someone who could share her gift with the world. And that, more than anything else, was worth every tear, every hour of practice, and every whispered doubt. That evening, as she returned home and sat at her piano once more, she played for herself. Not for an audience, not for applause, not for anyone else. She played because she loved it, because it was a part of who she was, and because she knew now that her music could reach beyond her own small room. She played freely, joyfully, and with a confidence that had taken years to grow. And in that moment, she knew that this was only the beginning. The day of the school talent showcase arrived, and she could feel her nerves buzzing from the moment she woke up. Her stomach churned, her hands felt slightly shaky, and her heart beat faster than she thought possible. She tried to stay calm, repeating the melodies she had practiced in her head, imagining herself playing perfectly. But it wasn't fear of making a mistake that worried her most. It was the memory of the laughter, the mocking voices, the whispers from classmates who didn't understand her. What if it all came back? What if this time? They laughed louder, pushed harder, and made her feel small again. She arrived at the school auditorium and was immediately struck by the sight of so many students, parents, and teachers. The room buzzed with excitement, but for her it felt overwhelming. Her fingers itched to play, but the piano she would use wasn't the familiar one in her living room. It was bigger, louder, more imposing, and the thought of sitting in front of so many eyes made her feel exposed. She stood near the side of the stage, listening to the other performers, hearing the cheers and claps that greeted their performances. The noise was both encouraging and terrifying. When her name was finally called, she felt her chest tighten. Walking onto the stage, she could see the audience, a sea of faces looking back at her. Some recognized her, the quiet girl who had always carried a love for music that no one seemed to understand. Others were seeing her for the first time, curious about what she could do. Whispers traveled across the room, and she could feel the doubt in the air. A few students snickered, exchanging glances as if expecting her to fail. She could feel the weight of their skepticism pressing down on her, but she reminded herself that she didn't play for them. She played for the music, for the emotions it carried, and for the small voice inside her that had believed in her all along. Sitting at the piano, she took a deep breath. Her fingers hovered above the keys, poised but slightly tense. For a moment she considered running away, hiding in the back of the auditorium where no one could see her. But then she remembered all the hours she had spent practicing, all the quiet nights alone with her music, The way the piano had always listened without judgment. This was her chance to show the world. Not to prove them wrong, but to share what had always been hers. She pressed the first key and the sound rang out, soft but clear, filling the room with its delicate presence. At first, the audience didn't know what to expect. Some continued whispering, some smiled politely, and some leaned forward, curious. But as the first few notes drifted across the auditorium, a subtle change began. The skeptical faces softened. The whispers faded. The laughter, which had seemed so certain moments ago, disappeared entirely. People were listening, really listening, as if the music had cast a spell over them. She closed her eyes and let the melody guide her. The first piece was slow, gentle, almost hesitant, but it carried emotion. Each note felt like a word in a story she was telling. A story that didn't need language. The piano was no longer just an instrument. It was her voice, her heart, her courage all laid bare. Her fingers moved with confidence, no longer uncertain or awkward. She felt the music flowing through her, connecting her to everyone in the room without a single word spoken. By the middle of the piece, the change in the audience was undeniable. People were leaning in, captivated by the sound, their eyes wide with wonder. Some held their breath, caught up in the tension and release of the melody. Others closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them, feeling it touch something deep inside. She could feel their attention, and it strengthened her. Every note, every chord became more deliberate, more alive. She was no longer playing alone. She was playing for them, for the emotions she could see reflected on their faces. The tempo shifted slightly as she moved into a faster section of the piece. Her hands danced across the keys with precision and grace, creating harmonies that felt both familiar and new. The music carried energy and excitement, pulling the audience along with it. Even those who had been skeptical or dismissive at first were now leaning forward, completely absorbed. A few parents exchanged glances, surprised at the talent of the quiet girl on stage. Some students whispered to each other, unable to contain their astonishment. The laughter that had once been so certain seemed like a distant memory, replaced by awe and admiration. She felt a surge of confidence. This was what she had been preparing for all those years, the chance to show not just her skill but her passion, her dedication, her love for music. Every late night of practice, every mistake corrected, every hour spent alone at the piano had led to this moment. And now, as the audience hung on her every note, she understood something she had always known deep down. Music was powerful. It could speak where words failed. It could transform doubt into wonder. It could turn skeptics into believers. The final part of the piece was slow again, soft and delicate, a gentle fade that left the room suspended in sound. Her fingers lingered on the last notes, letting them echo as long as possible. For a moment, there was complete silence. Not a cough, not a whisper, not a shuffle of feet. Just the music, hanging in the air, and the shared experience of everyone in the room. Then slowly the applause began. A few claps at first, hesitant and small, as if unsure how to respond. Then the applause grew, filling the auditorium with warmth and excitement. People were standing, cheering, and some even had tears in their eyes. She had done it. She sat for a moment, catching her breath, feeling the adrenaline rush through her body. The applause was loud, continuous, and heartfelt. For the first time in her life, she felt truly seen. Not just noticed, not just tolerated, but genuinely appreciated for the person she was and the gift she had nurtured in silence for so many years. The laughter and mockery that had once haunted her seemed irrelevant now, as if they had never existed. She had proven, not to anyone else but to herself, that dedication, patience, and love for what you do can create something remarkable. After stepping down from the stage, she was greeted by a few students who had previously mocked her. Their faces were different now, a mixture of surprise and admiration. One of them said quietly, "I didn't know you could play like that." She smiled politely, feeling a strange warmth in her chest. She didn't need to respond with words. The music had already spoken for her. Even the teachers who had once doubted her offered congratulations, and some nodded with quiet pride. She realized that what she had feared most, judgment, ridicule, failure, had transformed into respect, acknowledgement, and a sense of belonging. That night, as she walked home with the memory of the performance still fresh, she felt a sense of peace she had never known before. The fear that had weighed on her for years was gone, replaced by confidence and hope. She knew that the road ahead would still have challenges. But she had learned an important truth. When you pursue something you love with persistence and honesty, It has the power to change not only your life, but also the way others see you. She returned home and sat at her piano once again. This time it was different. The keys felt familiar, yes, but they also seemed larger somehow, more significant. She played for herself, reliving the performance in her mind, experimenting with new variations and letting her creativity flow freely. Every note, every chord, every melody reminded her that this was only the beginning. The world was bigger than her room, bigger than the teasing, bigger than the doubts, and now she had taken her first step into it. As the night went on, she realized that she had discovered more than just the joy of performing. She had discovered her own strength, her own voice, and her ability to touch others in ways she had never imagined. The music she had once played in secret, fearing laughter and judgment, had now become a bridge between her and the world. And in that moment, she understood something profound. Passion, patience, and belief in yourself are more powerful than any doubt, more enduring than any mockery, and more meaningful than anything anyone else could say. She smiled quietly to herself, knowing that tomorrow would bring new challenges, new critics, and new opportunities. But she was ready. She had faced fear, embraced her talent, and shared her gift with others. The laughter that had once haunted her seemed almost meaningless now, replaced by the applause, the wonder, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing that she had given everything she had to the music she loved. And that, she realized, was the most important applause of all. After her performance at the talent showcase, life began to feel different. Not everything changed overnight, but she could sense a subtle shift in the way people looked at her. Those who had once whispered behind her back now nodded with a newfound respect when she walked by. Teachers who had sometimes doubted her abilities smiled more often, offering encouragement instead of impatience. Even some classmates who had teased her now stopped to compliment her, if only quietly. It was a small change, but it made a big difference in how she felt about herself. The experience gave her confidence, but it also gave her a new sense of responsibility. She realized that her music could affect others in ways she had never imagined. One afternoon, a younger student approached her after school. His eyes were wide, full of curiosity, and he said quietly, "I want to learn piano like you. Can you teach me?" She was taken aback. For years, she had played mostly for herself, rarely thinking about teaching or sharing her knowledge directly. But now she understood that her dedication could inspire someone else. With a gentle smile, she agreed. Teaching him became a new joy. She learned patience in a different way, explaining the notes, helping him feel the rhythm, and seeing his face light up when he mastered a piece. Her practice sessions began to take on a new energy. She played with more intention, knowing that the music she created could reach more than just herself. She experimented with different sounds, sometimes slowing down to explore every note in detail, sometimes speeding up to feel the energy of movement and excitement. Her creativity seemed boundless. Composing her own music became a natural part of the process, and she started recording some of her compositions in small notebooks. Each page held a story, a memory, or an emotion she wanted to capture. Outside of school, she began to notice other ways her music could touch people. On weekends, she would visit local community events or small gatherings, sometimes offered the chance to perform. At first, she felt nervous. What if they didn't care? What if they laughed or ignored her? But she reminded herself of the showcase, of the power her music had to capture attention and evoke feeling. And each time she played, she noticed people pausing to listen, smiling, nodding, or even closing their eyes as if the music had transported them to another place. The joy she felt in those moments was unlike anything else she had ever experienced. Her family began to take notice too. Her parents, who had sometimes been unsure of her dedication, started attending her performances when they could. They watched quietly, eyes glistening, realizing that the hours she had spent alone in her room had not been wasted. Her piano was more than an instrument. It had become a window into her soul, a way to show the world who she truly was. They began to understand her in a deeper way, appreciating not just her talent but her perseverance, her focus, and the joy she found in something that seemed simple, yet was so complex and meaningful to her. At school, her peers' attitudes continued to evolve. While a few still struggled to understand her passion, most now regarded her with admiration. They asked questions about her practice, how she learned, and what inspired her music. Some even started attending the small recitals she performed during lunch breaks or after school. It was strange to think that just a short time ago, these same students had laughed at her, Now they watched, captivated, leaning forward as if every note held a secret meant only for them. The change wasn't about winning their approval. It was about being seen for who she truly was. One day, a local music teacher attended one of her small performances by chance. After she played, the teacher approached her with an expression of surprise and admiration. "You have something special," the teacher said. "Not everyone can connect with people through music the way you do. Have you considered performing in larger venues or even competitions?" The suggestion startled her. She had never thought beyond her school performances. The idea of a larger stage, a bigger audience, even the thought of formal recognition, felt both exciting and intimidating. Yet she knew deep down that this was the next step in her journey. Inspired by this encouragement, she began to practice with new purpose. Her routines became more structured, with time dedicated not only to playing and composing, but also to refining technique and expression. She listened to recordings of professional pianists, studied their approach to dynamics and emotion, and tried to incorporate elements that resonated with her own style. She worked tirelessly, often losing herself in the music for hours, but this time it felt different. She played not just to master notes, but to convey feelings, to tell stories without words, and to share her inner world with anyone willing to listen. Her confidence also began to influence other parts of her life. She spoke more openly in class, shared ideas without hesitation, and even joined discussions where she had previously remained quiet. The courage she had built through music began to carry over into daily experiences. She realized that the same focus and determination she applied to piano could be applied to other challenges, schoolwork, friendships, and even personal goals she had been hesitant to pursue. Music had taught her more than just how to play. It had taught her resilience, patience, and the power of persistence. Yet she never forgot the moments of struggle that had brought her here. She remembered the mocking voices, the whispers, the moments of loneliness when she practiced in secret. They had shaped her in important ways. She had learned to trust herself when no one else did, to keep going even when recognition was absent, and to find joy in effort, not just success. These memories fueled her determination to continue, reminding her that passion and perseverance could overcome fear, doubt, and even ridicule. As her skill and confidence grew, she started thinking about the future more seriously. She dreamed of performing in larger venues, of creating music that reached beyond her small town, and even of teaching others who shared her passion. She imagined small classrooms filled with eager students, or concert halls where the sound of her piano could fill every corner. These were dreams she had once thought impossible, but now they felt attainable. Each practice session, each performance, each small success brought her closer to these goals. She also began to understand the importance of connecting with the audience. Music was no longer just personal. It was a conversation. She learned to watch faces, notice reactions, and adjust her playing to convey the feelings she wanted most effectively. Sometimes she slowed down a section to let the emotions sink in. Other times she played faster to create excitement. She discovered that music could evoke memories, spark joy, or even provide comfort. This realization made her even more passionate about sharing her gift. Her relationships began to deepen as well. Students who once ignored her now sought her out for friendship, and she discovered that she could connect with others through shared interests and experiences. Her family grew closer too as they shared in her successes and supported her dreams. She learned to balance her time, dedicating herself to music while also nurturing the relationships that mattered most. Music had opened doors, but it had also reminded her that human connection was equally important. Despite her growing recognition, she remained humble. She remembered the quiet nights of practice alone, the frustration of mistakes, and the feeling of inadequacy she sometimes carried. These experiences kept her grounded. She knew that talent alone was not enough. Dedication, hard work, and a genuine love for what she did were equally vital. She approached every new opportunity with respect, curiosity, and a willingness to learn, knowing that each performance, each composition, and each interaction was a chance to grow. One afternoon, she was invited to perform at a small community event. The audience was larger than anything she had played for before, but she approached the piano with calm determination. As her fingers moved across the keys, she noticed familiar reactions, smiles, attentive faces, and even a few who closed their eyes to fully immerse themselves in the music. When she finished, the applause was warm and enthusiastic, and several people approached her to say how moved they had been. That moment reminded her why she pursued music, not for fame, not for recognition, but for the ability to touch others' hearts. Her compositions also began to take on new depth. She wrote pieces inspired by moments of joy, sadness, hope, and resilience. Each melody carried a story, and she carefully considered the emotions she wanted to convey. Sometimes she would sit for hours adjusting a single note, testing how it made her feel and imagining how it would feel to others. She discovered that music could tell stories without words, and in doing so, it could bring people together, evoke empathy, and provide comfort. Through all of this, she remained grounded in the lessons of her past. The laughter she had once endured, the doubts of others, and the moments of isolation had shaped her into someone who could persevere, remain focused, and find joy in effort. She understood that the journey was ongoing, that there would always be new challenges, but she also knew that her love for music, her dedication, and her ability to connect with others would guide her forward. By the end of the school year, she had not only grown as a musician but also as a person. She had discovered strength, resilience, and the value of patience. She had learned that true talent was not just about skill, but about heart, dedication, and the courage to share oneself with the world. Her music had transformed her life, opening doors, building confidence, and creating connections she had never imagined. And as she sat at her piano each day, she felt a quiet sense of pride and possibility, knowing that this was only the beginning of her journey. Time continued to move forward, and with it, her journey with music grew richer and more meaningful. She had learned that talent alone could not shape a life. It was patience, dedication, and belief in oneself that made the difference. Each day brought new opportunities to play, create, and share, and she embraced them all with a quiet determination that had been growing for years. Her love for music had become inseparable from who she was, and that love carried her through every challenge and success. As she continued to perform, the audiences she played for grew larger and more varied. She was invited to local community events, school functions, and even small concerts in neighboring towns. Every performance brought a mixture of excitement and nerves, but also a deep sense of purpose. She no longer played for herself alone. She played for the people who listened, for the emotions she could evoke, and for the connections she could create. Every note was a bridge, linking her inner world to the hearts of others. The reactions of those who heard her play never ceased to amaze her. Children would stop in their tracks, eyes wide with wonder. Parents would smile and nod in appreciation, and even strangers would sometimes approach her afterward to say how moved they had been. She began to realize that music had a unique power to transcend differences, to bring people together, and to speak in ways that words never could. This realization strengthened her desire to continue, to practice, and to refine her skills so that she could reach even more hearts with her performances. Her compositions became increasingly personal and expressive. She would write music inspired by everyday moments, small joys, and even challenges she faced. Sometimes a melody would emerge from a quiet afternoon spent watching sunlight filter through a window. Other times from the tension she felt during a difficult day. Each piece carried a piece of her life, her emotions, and her perspective, allowing anyone who listened to feel a connection with her experiences. She discovered that creating music was not just about playing. It was about telling a story, and through that story she could share a part of herself with the world. Alongside her performances, she continued teaching others who shared her passion. Her small student base gradually grew as word spread about her skill and her gentle, patient teaching style. Each student brought something unique, and she cherished the chance to guide them, to help them discover the joy and discipline of music. Teaching also taught her patience and empathy in new ways. She learned to see the world through the eyes of her students, to celebrate their small victories and to support them when they struggled. In doing so, she realized that the act of sharing her knowledge and passion could be as rewarding as performing herself. Her confidence in music spilled over into other areas of her life. She found herself more willing to speak up, to share her ideas, and to pursue opportunities that had once seemed intimidating. The courage she had developed from performing in front of audiences, from standing on stage despite fear, became a foundation she could rely on in everyday life. Challenges that might have once seemed overwhelming now felt like opportunities to grow. She understood that the skills and discipline she cultivated through music applied to all aspects of life, shaping her into a more resilient and confident person. Despite all the success and recognition she began to receive, she remained humble. She never forgot the quiet nights spent practicing alone, the mistakes she had made, or the whispers of doubt from those who did not understand her passion. Those experiences had shaped her, teaching her perseverance, resilience, and the importance of staying true to oneself. She knew that talent was not a gift that guaranteed success. It was a responsibility, one that required dedication, practice, and an open heart. Her humility became a guiding principle, reminding her to approach every performance, every lesson, and every composition with sincerity and care. One day, she received an invitation to perform at a larger event in the city. It was the kind of opportunity she had once only dreamed of, a chance to play before a wide and diverse audience. She felt nervous, of course, but the nerves were different now. They were not just fear. They were anticipation, excitement, and the energy that came from knowing she had worked hard for this moment. She practiced with focus and care, refining each piece, exploring every nuance, and imagining how her audience might respond. Every rehearsal brought her closer to the performance she envisioned. When the day of the city performance arrived, she approached the stage with a calm determination. She could feel the weight of expectation in the air, both from herself and from the audience, but she reminded herself that her music was a gift, and that she had the power to share it fully. As she began to play, the first notes resonated through the hall, soft and deliberate, capturing attention immediately. She felt the energy of the room shift, the audience leaning forward, fully engaged, fully present. In that moment, she realized that all the years of practice, all the moments of doubt, and all the times she had been laughed at had led her here. Her performance flowed naturally, each note carrying emotion and intention. She played with both technical skill and heartfelt expression, moving seamlessly between soft, gentle passages and strong, bold sequences. The audience responded intuitively, caught up in the music, some closing their eyes to fully experience the sound, others smiling, visibly moved. She noticed the power of music to connect people, to evoke feeling without words, and she felt a deep sense of fulfillment. This was why she had persevered, why she had dedicated herself so fully to her passion. After the performance, the applause was overwhelming. People stood clapping and cheering, some even whistling in admiration. Several approached her to say how deeply they had been touched, how the music had made them feel emotions they had not expected to feel. She felt a quiet joy, not from the attention itself, but from knowing that her music had reached them, had spoken to them in ways that words could not. She realized that this connection, the ability to touch hearts through her art, was far more meaningful than any recognition or praise. Her life continued to evolve around music. She continued performing, teaching, and composing, always striving to grow as a musician and as a person. She explored new styles, experimented with different forms of composition, and collaborated with other musicians. Every experience became a learning opportunity, a chance to improve and a chance to deepen the connection between her music and the people who heard it. She discovered that the more she embraced her passion fully, the more it shaped her life in positive and unexpected ways. She also began to understand the responsibility that came with her gift. Music could inspire, comfort, and heal. She became aware of the impact her performances could have, and she approached each opportunity with thoughtfulness and intention. She wanted her music to mean something, to carry emotion, to create connection. She worked tirelessly to refine her compositions and performances, not for accolades, but to ensure that each note she played had depth, meaning, and resonance. As her journey progressed, she became a role model for others who were quietly passionate about something that set them apart. Students, peers, and even younger children looked up to her as someone who had persevered despite ridicule, someone who had transformed dedication into success, and someone who had remained humble throughout. She shared her story whenever she could, encouraging others to follow their passions, embrace their talents, and trust themselves even when the world seemed to doubt them. She understood that her journey was not just about her own growth, but about inspiring others to believe in themselves. Looking back, she realized how far she had come. From the quiet moments alone at the piano, from the whispered laughter of classmates, from the small victories in her living room, she had grown into a confident, skilled, and expressive musician. She had learned that obstacles and doubts were not barriers but stepping stones, and that the true measure of success was not fame or recognition, but the ability to remain true to oneself while sharing one's gifts with the world. Even now, she continued to play for herself, for her students, and for audiences. The joy of music never diminished. Each performance reminded her why she had started, why she had persevered through years of practice, and why she had believed in herself when others did not. She understood that music was not just sound. It was emotion, connection, and expression, and she cherished every moment she could spend creating it. She also learned to embrace balance. While music was central to her life, she nurtured friendships, family relationships, and other aspects of her personal growth. She understood that a fulfilled life included both passion and connection, discipline and joy, effort and rest. Her experiences taught her that pursuing a passion did not mean sacrificing other parts of life, but rather enhancing them, bringing richness and depth to every day. As the years went on, she continued to perform, teach, and compose. Her audience grew, her students flourished, and her own skill deepened. She remained humble, always remembering the beginnings, the laughter, the doubt, and the solitude that had shaped her. And she remained dedicated, driven not by recognition, but by love for the music, for the people it touched, and for the person she had become. Ultimately, she realized that her journey was never just about piano. It was about courage, perseverance, and the power of believing in oneself. It was about finding joy in effort, discovering strength in adversity, and connecting with others through the language of passion. Her music had been the key, but her heart and determination had opened the door. She had faced doubt, fear, and ridicule, and in doing so, she had become a person capable of inspiring, moving, and touching the lives of those around her. She smiled quietly as she played, knowing that the journey would continue. There would always be new challenges, new audiences, and new music to create, but she was ready for all of it, armed with the knowledge that love for what you do, patience, and faith in yourself can turn even the smallest beginnings into something extraordinary. The laughter that had once haunted her now seemed distant, almost meaningless, and she knew that the applause, the recognition, and the joy she felt were the results of years of dedication, resilience, and passion. Her story was not just about music. It was about life, growth, and the human spirit. And as she continued to play, teach, and share her music, she knew that the best was always yet to come.